Hi, I'm Ken Walsleben. I'm a professor of entrepreneurial practice at the Whitman School of Management, Syracuse University. The title of this quick hit video is So the Bank Said No. So what are we going to do? The bank has turned us down. We've got product to move. We've got orders to fulfill. What are our alternatives? What's the landscape look like of alternative strategies? That's what we're going to discuss quickly here to give you a quick rundown of the alternatives available to you. Any situation that arises like this should start with a quick discussion about bootstrapping. Now, bootstrapping, as you well know, is your ability to stretch a buck and your ability to continue to find a way to make ends meet without the use of outside capital. So you're going to do some of the things you see on this screen. A friend of mine once gave me an old ditty that said, never buy new when you can buy used. Never buy when you can lease. Never lease when you can rent. Never rent when you can borrow. And never borrow when you can steal. Okay, we can ignore the last one, but you get the point. You need to find a way to stretch a buck. And being creative and innovative in ways to do that make a lot of sense. Now, is leasing long-term more expensive than buying? Yes. Is it, however, a better use of cash flow management? You bet. So early stage, it's always better to stretch out your cost of goods and your cost of materials. Even if in the long term, it might be a smidge more expensive, it's better to conserve cash. After all, cash is what you need to avoid having to go outside for additional financing. So by all means, take advantage of some of these strategies. Certainly I have in my past as well. But let's understand that there's two places that you can go in general. One is called debt, and the other is called equity. Let's understand the debt side of things. Now, where does debt live? Well, certainly you're expected to kind of put in some of your own cash. After all, if you don't, why should anyone else believe in your business? So now, you don't have to put in every last dollar you've ever made, but you do need to put in a sizable investment into the company, enough that it matters from you. You can also look to friends and family and others. Traditional banks, but presumably the purpose of this video is that the bank said no. So we're going to confine our conversation to the balance of these bullets. We're going to talk about some of the other alternatives here. Let's start first off with the SBA. You may not know it, but the SBA does not lend money directly. So why am I talking about it? Because they guarantee the loans that you would get at banks. So if you're working with a bank and the bank says no, find out if they can provide you an SBA guaranteed solution. The SBA stands behind the bank. It's invisible to you. There is an extra fee, although because you're a veteran, that's usually waived. But the point is that the SBA can oftentimes spring things through because effectively for the bank, they're trading your credit for that of Uncle Sam's. And although some of us are not the best of credits, and some of us might even be better than Uncle Sam these days, the point is that the bank can find a way to now say yes because the SBA has found its way through for you. That's solution one. Additional solutions come in the form of what we'll call collectively asset-based lenders. Asset-based lenders, as the name implies, will work with you if you have decent amounts of collateral to pledge. Now, you might not qualify in the traditional sense from a credit standpoint, which is why the bank said no. Maybe you're too new. Maybe you had a loss last year. Maybe you're in an industry that's unfavorable and banks don't want to lend to it. Or maybe the bank is overexposed to a given industry that you're in. The point being, for whatever reason, the bank has said no. What do? Well, you might oftentimes have a fair amount of collateral on hand, especially if you haven't pledged at all to your bank. For specifics about inventory pledges and collateral pledges and the strategies around them, I direct your attention to the video entitled Essential Legal Knowledge. But for now, let's assume that you have available to you to pledge additional assets like accounts receivable, inventory, hard assets, maybe even the purchase orders that you're trying to fulfill. All of this can be pledged to a new additional incremental lender. And because of their positioning and because of the way they underwrite things, they may be willing to work with you when the bank has said no, primarily because the bank is not always a collateral lender. But as the name implies, asset-based lenders look at collateral, look at it hard, oftentimes to try and find a way to cover up blemishes that might otherwise exist on your credit or or the underwriting capabilities. So let's also talk about, and we're going to come back to different kinds of ABLs in a minute, but let's also talk about something you've likely never heard of called a Community Development Financial Institution, CDFIs. These are effectively like banks. They lend money. They're managed and governed by the SBA. They report through the SBA. And believe it or not, the SBA requires that the regional banks provide funding to the CDFIs. So think this through. The bank who said no to you is being forced by the government to fund a regional CDFI who may say yes to you. Makes sense? Maybe. The point being that for you, this is a critical player to know. Now, there are not many CDFIs in any given community, typically one, two, in a given metropolitan statistical area, an MSA. So how do you find yours? Go to the SBA.gov website, find your way to CDFIs, and there'll be a search engine there where you plug in your zip code, and it will provide you the name and contact information of a CDFI institution that services your region. Make these contacts. Now, CDFIs are not going to be able to provide you big bucks, but for small and mid-sized businesses, they're a tremendous resource, and they work just like a bank. You know, they make the same sort of decisions. They document things the same way as a bank does, but oftentimes they can say yes when the other banks have already said no. Now, I mentioned a few moments ago about asset-based lenders. Let's see what I mean by that. So if the bank or the CDFI has turned you down, maybe you're too new, you're not profitable enough, you're not in a favorable industry, please understand that an ABL, asset-based lender, may be an alternative for you. Yes, they do charge higher rates of interest, so it's not as cheap as a bank, but they can work with you if you have substantial collateral to pledge. And get this now, guys, sometimes the same bank who said no to you will have an ABL department who specializes in these sorts of things, and they can say yes under the same roof at the same institution. And sometimes the lender on the front end who said no doesn't really understand how the ABL in his bank works, or if it's a big bank, he may not even know that the ABL exists in his bank. So be sure to ask. If the bank has to say no to you, find out if they have an ABL department and connect with them. And funny enough, sometimes they can say yes to you. Now let's talk about some freestanding ABLs. Let's talk about an asset-based lender called a purchase order funder. This is not going to be at your local bank. This is going to be an independent financial institution, and they live for situations where you've got a big order, maybe from a big box store, and you've got a big order that exceeds your capabilities to fulfill. You don't have enough inventory, you don't have enough raw materials, so you can't get enough credit from your suppliers, whatever the purpose is. Bottom line is the order dwarfs your capabilities to perform. Don't fret. If you can't get additional funding from your lender, you can turn to a purchase order funder. They will effectively join you with the purchase order. You'll pledge the purchase order to them. The two of you will share it. They will come in and provide you the funding so that you can perform under the purchase order. They will take a piece of your pie. Make no mistake. They're providing critical funding, but it's not cheap. It's going to cost you between 3 and 5% of their funding amount per month. But let's think this through for a minute. If you're working with gross margins and approximating 40, 35, 40%, which is likely the case, and you have to use a purchase order funder's money and bridge this situation for 90 days, well, that's 12 to 15%. Does it still enable you to make plenty of profit? Yeah. Does it now enable you to perform with a critical new company, a new customer? Yeah. Please understand that purchase order funders, they're in, they're out. They help you and they move on. They don't require that you continue to work with them into perpetuity. They are short-term lenders who understand purchase order finance, understand the nuances of how to make it all happen. And do understand that purchase order funders are not stupid. They've just advanced a whole bunch of money to you so that you can perform on the invoice. They're going to control the payment flow. The payment from your big box customer is going to need to go to them, but that's understandable. It shouldn't cause you too much agita. But the reality is their ability to enable you to perform can make all the difference between happiness and failure. So do know that these companies exist. You can find them simply by Googling purchase order funders. Another type of ABL is a factoring company. I built and ran one for over 20 years. Here's how factoring works. We call it, it's also referred to as invoice factoring or invoice discounting. Let's assume you're over here, you're a customer, the big box retailer is to the right, and I'm down at the bottom of the screen as your friendly factor. The first thing that happens is you're going to sell your goods or services to your customer, the big box retailer, and you're going to send them an invoice. That's all well and good. The transaction has now occurred. However, your customer, the big box retailer, they they don't have any big rush on their end to make payment to you, but you might need cash quickly, and perhaps even prior to when that invoice is due. In any case, you can turn around to the factoring company and send them a copy of your big box invoice and show them that you performed on it, that the invoice is good. The factoring company will then give you money on two different occasions. The first occasion they call the initial advance, and that goes back to you in the form of your first payment. That payment is typically 80% of the invoice amount. So if the invoice is for $10,000, they're going to transfer $8,000 into your account immediately. At that point in time, you and the factor will tell the account debtor that when they do find their checkbook and they do want to send payment, to send payment to your factor. The factor does control the flow of funds here. After all, they've just financed your invoice and given you $8,000. So the payment for $10,000 is going to go from the big box retailer to the factoring company. Factoring company is going to immediately cash the check, reimburse themselves for the $8,000 that they already gave you. They're also going to retain a fee, typically about 3%. The balance of the money, so-called reserve payment, that goes back to you in the form of a second payment. So if the factor's fee was 3%, that means that there's a total of 17% left over. For in our example, $1,700. That's that second reserve payment. So between payment one and payment two, you've received 97 cents on the dollar. You've given up 3% of the invoice amount so that you could get that $8,000 up front when you needed it most so that you could employ it in your business as you see fit. That's factoring. A simple, quick overview. Now let's also talk about the other fork in the road. You might consider equity financing, the so-called Shark Tank approach. And with equity financing, you oftentimes are going to either look for your own wallet or to friends, family, and others, or to angel investors. If you work with friends or family, please promise me that you'll document the transaction, that you won't leave it as a handshake. You owe it to this person who is out of loyalty and or familial love handing you cash. You owe it to them to document what's going on, how much of your business you're giving them. Because remember, equity funding is dilutive financing. You're coughing up a piece of your business ownership in exchange for cash. So promise me that you'll document it so there's no misunderstandings that can impact family relationships for a lifetime. What I'd like to do now, however, is talk more about angel investors. What's an angel investor, you might wonder? These are individuals, no, they don't have wings, but they might as well. These are individuals who are willing to make investments into promising businesses. They tend to be well-capitalized individuals, typically a little later in their career. They've made their money. They might be retired or semi-retired. They're individuals who want to stay in the game, who want to help grow small and mid-sized emerging businesses with promise. They are not foolish. They're not stupid. They're not going to throw money away, but they are dealing with their own purse, their own wallet, for making their own decisions. These investments tend not to be humongous. Somewhere between $50,000 and $1 million is the sweet spot. Sometimes angel investors will team up. You might get two or three of them to share in an investment. But the point is that these people are just gold to you. But do understand that you want to find the right angel. Everyone's money is green. You want to find an angel who can help you grow. Odds are you don't want an angel who's going to be a silent partner. You want someone who can add value to the business, who can provide you insight, advice, maybe perhaps be able to open up their network of contacts to you. The point is, once they become a partner of yours, they're incented to try and help grow your business. So these people can really help generate tremendous growth for your company. Of course, the downside is you're giving them a piece of your company. So the question I'm always posed is, where do we find angels? Well, it can be difficult to find them, but do know that your professionals are typically the people that can open doors. Your banker, your accountant, your insurance agent, your lawyer. These are people who, in addition to their services that they render you, ought to be able to point you towards additional people in your community who can help out. You might also have found, talk to your regional chamber of commerce. Most chambers of commerce keep an informal list. They don't publish it, but it's tucked away in somebody's desk drawer. They keep an informal list of investors in their community who have at one time or another expressed an interest in financing promising businesses. So don't look past your chambers of commerce as great places to go find these sorts of people. The reality now is that we've, through quick hits, gone through some of the landscape of places to turn to, whether it's the SBA, whether it's a CDFI, whether it's asset-based lenders, whether it's angel investors. These are the kinds of people that you can dig in with to try and help save the day. If you're looking for additional detailed information, there's a long form video that goes into the weeds and talks more about the specifics and the ways to approach different people and how to position and your business for maximum success. It's also called So the Bank Said No, What Now? I wish you all the very best of luck. Go forth, be fruitful.